Hey, Andre, how you doing? All right, thanks for kicking things off. I appreciate that. It's not always the easiest thing to do in discussion boards, so I really appreciate you taking a plunge, so to speak, right? So, James Montgomery Flagg, that's the designer who did this piece. It's a really, really famous piece, and I'm so glad you picked this. This is actually one of my, I'll be honest with you, this is one of the pieces that I saw as a little kid and thought to myself, wow, I want to do stuff like that. And I decided that I knew I was going to be a creative and I was going to be involved in some sort of design and art by the time I was probably 7 years old. And this was one of the pieces responsible for that. So I was so pleased to see this. All right, so your description, I think, is very accurate. One clarification I want to make is when we talk about I keep on jumping around here. Sorry about that. When we talk about balance, we have it's you basically you look at the composition itself, and if you're talking about compositional balance, you look at the whole of the composition. If you're talking about balance, let's say with individual elements within the composition, that's something that's a little bit different. Typically, when we look at a composition, we look at balance in general in the whole composition. So there's really no such thing as a composition that can display symmetrical balance as well as asymmetrical balance, as you're alluding to in your writing. Now, sure, there are elements that might have a little asymmetry. The fact that U is bigger than the type on the left-hand side of the composition, I suppose that would point to asymmetric typographic composition, but not to the point where it would even really mention it, because this poster is pure symmetry. All right, now I just want you to understand, pure symmetry doesn't necessarily mean that when you fold the two pieces over, they have to line up exactly, as long as there's elements on one side of the page that are distributed equally on the other side of the page. We call that symmetry. So we have symmetry here in the illustration being centered. We have a symmetry in the type. As I said, because there's a little emphasis on the word "you," doesn't make this a asymmetrical typographic composition, okay? It's still showing symmetry. Let me show you an example. And to show you this example, I want to jump over to, I didn't want to do that. Sorry about that. Let me do this. Okay, let me see. Okay, I just want to get to the course announcements. That's what I'm getting at. So we have these examples in the course announcements right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, it looks like it's going to end up being asymmetry, but it's not. This is symmetry. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because we fold this down the middle and this is there's still an element here, an element here. There's an element here that's countered with the type over here, as opposed to an asymmetric balance where there's no counterweight on the other side of the page. It's pure asymmetry. Okay, so as we can see, you wouldn't necessarily say that a composition has asymmetry and symmetry. Okay, my question for you is this: is our reading this week talks about emphasis, and emphasis, of course, we use emphasis to create contrasts, or I should say we use contrasts to create emphasis. We use emphasis to create hierarchy. So right now, I think the emphasis is placed on the word "you." And my question to you is why do you think this designer decided to place emphasis on the word "you" as opposed to, let's say, "I," or even or "want," or even "for U.S. Army"? That whole that entire line right there emphasized. Why is it "you"? To think about it, look at the composition, study the image, and why do you think the word "you" is emphasized in this composition? All right, great job. Thank you. Andre, very much for, as I said, for kicking things off. And just go ahead and address that question in your response. Thank you very much.